A gentle breeze wove through the wisteria-draped arbor where Elena stood, her wedding gown whispering against the dewy grass. Across the rose-bordered lawn, Adrian watched with taut muscles and a racing heart. Today was meant to be the happiest moment of their engagement weekend, yet an undercurrent of unease twisted through him. The guests' murmurs fluttered like startled birds as Elena closed her eyes, lifted her chin, and began to sing. Her voice, at first a tremor of vulnerability, blossomed into a clear, aching melody that seemed to draw out every hidden emotion in the hushed garden. With each note, Adrian felt the world narrow until all he could perceive was the steady thrum in her chest, the subtle rise and fall echoing in his own breast. It was as if her song carried a secret message, one of longing, of unspoken fears, and of a past she had never revealed. Though the sun painted golden highlights on her auburn hair, shadows gathered in Adrian's mind. Was this performance a joyous declaration of love or a desperate plea for understanding? As Elena's final chord dissolved into the morning light, a question hung in the air, binding them both. Could he truly hear her heart, or was he destined to remain deaf to the deepest rhythms of her soul? Morning haze still clung to the rose bushes when Adrian slipped quietly away from the remnants of the engagement breakfast. He needed air, needed space to sort the swirl of emotions that Elena's song had stirred. Beneath the lacy canopy of wisteria, he paced with clenched fists, replaying every nuance of her voice. In the midst of wedding preparations, had he truly understood his fiancée's heart, or had he been blind to the shadows she carried? Across the garden, Elena gathered discarded rose petals in trembling hands. The guests' praise still buzzed faintly at the periphery of her mind, but inside, a different tune played, a melody of doubt she'd never shared aloud. She looked to where Adrian had been moments before and saw only empty grass, punctuated by her own soft footprints. Her heart tightened. She had hoped her song would bridge the distance she felt growing between them. Instead, she feared it had driven them further apart. Just then, a crisp voice cut through the quiet. "Beautiful performance, Elena." It was Victor Mallory, her childhood rival at the conservatory, now a rising star opera singer. His grin was calculated, the kind born of long-remembered envy. Elena's stomach knotted. Victor had long resented her effortless gift for music, the ease with which notes danced from her lips while he'd spent years honing his baritone. She forced a polite smile. "Thank you, Victor," she said, voice steady though her palms were damp. "I'm glad you enjoyed it." "Oh, I enjoyed it all right," he replied, stepping closer. "But tell me, was this your own composition, or did you adapt it from someone else's work?" His tone was casual, but his eyes glinted with challenge. A gathering of curious onlookers lent an unintended audience to his insinuation. Elena's cheeks flared. She opened her mouth to defend herself, but before the words formed, a polite clapping rippled around them. Adrian reemerged, tall and composed, but tension radiated from his posture. He moved to stand beside Elena, placing a steadying hand on her shoulder. "Victor," Adrian greeted, voice cool, "always good to see you." Victor inclined his head. "Adrian, enjoying the weekend?" His glance flicked to Elena, then back. "I must say I didn't expect such heartfelt performance at a garden party. Quite the spectacle." Adrian's grip tightened. "We value authenticity," he replied, "unlike some of us who rely on second-hand brilliance." A hush fell. Elena's heart pounded, torn between gratitude at Adrian's defense and alarm at the growing friction. Victor's lips curved in a mock bow. "Touché," he murmured. "But remember, Adrian, artistry demands originality. Let's hope our fiancé here isn't leaning too heavily on borrowed passion." He stepped back, surveying the crowd with a satisfied smirk before melting into the throng of guests. Elena closed her eyes, fighting to steady her breath. Her world, once lush and sunlit, suddenly felt brittle. Had her song, her unguarded confession, invited scrutiny instead of understanding? She turned to Adrian, searching his face. He met her gaze, but his expression was unreadable, equal parts protective and probing. "Come on," he said softly, guiding her by the elbow. "Let's walk." They drifted along the garden path, rose petals cushioning their steps. Elena fought rising tears. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I thought my song might show you how I feel." Adrian halted, His jaw clenched, then softened. "I know how you feel, Elena." His voice was gentle, but a tremor lurked beneath. I just wish I understood more. Every time you sing, there's something you don't say in words. I hear emotion, but I don't always know its source." Elena's throat constricted. She wanted to explain about the night she discovered her mother's hidden diary, the heartbreak woven between its pages, the very inspiration for her melody. But the secret she had guarded for years felt too fragile to share now, amid the swirl of wedding plans and family expectations. Instead, she wrapped her arms around herself. "Some songs, they reveal more than the singer intends," she said quietly. "Perhaps I needed to hear my own truth more than I needed anyone else to." Adrian's face softened with concern. "Truth is what I want, Elena. Truth and trust. I love you, but I've felt this weekend that we're drifting into different worlds." He paused, searching her eyes. "I want to know you, every note, every heartbeat. But if you keep those parts hidden, how can we build a life together?" Her chest ached. He was right. Between her fear of vulnerability and his expectation of openness, a chasm yawned. She swallowed hard. "I'll tell you," she promised. "But I need time." He nodded slowly. "Time is something we can give each other, if we choose to." They continued in silence until a sudden clash of laughter shattered the moment. From the gazebo at the garden's edge, Victoria Dunham, Adrian's former fiancée, rose from her chair, her champagne flute raised in a pointed salute. "Darling, you look tense," she purred, her voice dripping with familiarity that no longer belonged. "Is Elena's performance too raw for you? Would you prefer something more polished?" Adrian's grip on Elena's hand tightened. "Victoria," he said curtly, "this isn't the time." Victoria's eyes flicked to Elena, amusement dancing at the corners. "Forgive me, I simply couldn't resist. After all, I did coach you through your last recital. I imagine you'd have faltered without my guidance." Elena's vision blurred with anger and embarrassment. She searched Adrian's face, but he seemed momentarily stunned. Victoria had always been the perfect concerto, elegant, flawless, and utterly insistent on standing center stage. Elena felt as though she were drowning in her predecessor's shadow. "Victoria," Adrian said firmly, "that's enough." Victoria delicately set her flute down. "Very well." But as she moved past them, her silken, gory sari brushing the manicured lawn, her parting words lingered. "Best of luck keeping up with true talent." Elena could no longer hold back. The garden, once a haven of blossoming romance, felt like a hall of mirrors reflecting every insecurity. She stepped forward. "I don't need to keep up with anyone," she said, voice trembling but clear. "My voice is mine. My passion is mine." Victoria's smile flickered, then twisted with derision. "We'll see how far passion carries you in the real world." Elena's throat tightened. She suppressed the urge to shout, to accuse, to collapse. Instead, she turned to Adrian, eyes glistening. "I thought this weekend was about us," she said softly. "But I feel torn between past ghosts and present doubts." Adrian drew her into a protective embrace. Guests paused to watch the confrontation, pity and curiosity mingling in their stares. "It is about us," he whispered into her hair, "and I'm sorry. I didn't realize how much weight you carry, but you're not alone." Her tears spilled over. All at once, relief and fear surged through her. Relief that Adrian understood her isolation, fear that she'd jeopardized everything with her impulsive confession song. She pressed her cheek against his chest, listening to the strong, steady beat of his heart, desperate for the reassurance she'd longed to find in her own melody. They remained locked together until evening's first lantern glimmer. When they finally parted, Elena straightened her spine. The inciting incident of judgment, Victor's insinuations, Victoria's barbed taunts, had exposed their vulnerabilities in full view. But in that shared moment of crisis, a fragile covenant formed. She would reveal her past, note by painful note, and he would listen with an open heart. As they walked back toward the estate, the groom's house looming like an unspoken promise, both sensed that the journey ahead would test their love in ways neither had anticipated. But with the first domino of conflict fallen, a deeper truth began to take shape. Only by facing the dissonance between their expectations and their realities could they hope to compose a harmony worth singing together. The first rays of dawn found the estate's gardens bathed in pale gold. dew glittering on every petal as if each flower were newly anointed. Elena lingered by a fountain, tracing idle patterns in the water's calm surface, but her reflection shivered with uncertainty. She had confessed to Adrian that she carried a secret, one rooted in the pages of her late mother's diary, detailing a forbidden love that fractured her family years ago. Though she had promised to share it, each time she tried, her throat clenched, and the words retreated back into her chest. Adrian arrived quietly, stepping over creeping ivies to stand beside her. He said nothing at first, merely offering silent solidarity. At length, he settled on the stone bench and patted the spot beside him. "Whenever you're ready," he murmured. "I'm here." Elena drew in a shaky breath. The morning birdsong felt like both blessing and burden, nature urging her forward even as her heart recoiled. "I'm afraid," she admitted, voice barely above a whisper. "Not of you, but of what the truth might do to us." He reached for her hand, thumb brushing her knuckles. "I understand fear, but I trust you. You can bear this with me." She let his warmth steady her. Under the wistaria's shadow, she began to speak. Of her mother, a gifted soprano whose career crumbled under scandal, of a clandestine romance with a composer of low birth, of betrayal that wound through Elena's childhood as whispers in the hallways. With each detail, she felt her own heart clench, yet Adrian's grip never wavered. When at last she faltered, he brushed a tear from her cheek. "Thank you for telling me," he said softly. "We'll face it together." Her confession lifted a veil, but also revealed deeper currents. The estate itself held memories of her mother's tragic finale, the very garden where she had once performed. Adrian resolved to help Elena reclaim those spaces, to turn pain into purpose. Over the next days, as wedding plans barreled forward, Elena and Adrian crafted moments that tested their newfound intimacy. They strolled through the maze of hedges that once echoed with her mother's final aria, practicing duets that wove their voices together in tentative harmony. Elena felt her confidence return with each shared note, the fear of judgment softened by Adrian's patient encouragement. Yet outside their private rehearsals, pressures mounted. Victor Mallory resurfaced at every social gathering, his baritone laughter trailing behind him like a storm cloud. At a sunset reception on the terrace, he cornered Elena again, proposing a friendly collaboration for an upcoming charity gala and demanding her full attention. Adrian intercepted, pulling Elena away to the edge of the terrace where lanterns bobbed like fireflies over the valley below. "Don't give him any more chances," Adrian said, voice low. "I'll speak to him." Elena hesitated. She wanted to assert herself, to prove she could resist his barbs alone. But the tension in Adrian's jaw reminded her that she didn't have to. She nodded, trusting his support. Adrian approached Victor with quiet authority, reminding him that Elena's commitments were her own. Caught off guard, Victor's smug smile flickered. "Very well," he conceded, but the challenge in his eyes remained. As Adrian led Elena back inside, she realized that protecting love often meant allowing someone else to fight her battles. That evening, the formal rehearsal dinner unfolded in the grand dining hall. Crystal chandeliers cast kaleidoscopic patterns on polished oak floors as guests in silk and satin took their places. Elena wore a gown reminiscent of her mother's final recital, a pale blue silk that caught the candlelight. When she rose to thank the hosts, her voice quivered with emotion, and in her speech she revealed the garden's significance to her heritage. The hall hushed, the weight of her words resonating through elegant columns. Adrian squeezed her hand from the head table, pride shining in his eyes. Then, from a darkened archway, Victoria Dunham emerged. Her entrance drew a ripple of gossip. She wore a shimmering gold sari and that calculating smile that had once ensnared Adrian's heart. This time, though, Victoria's gaze fixed solely on Elena, a predator marking territory. As the dinner concluded, Victoria approached. "Charming speech," she purred. "But be careful, sentimentality can overshadow talent." Elena drew in a breath, prepared to respond, but Adrian stepped forward, placing himself between them. His voice was courteous but firm. "Elena's talent stands on its own merits, and tonight we celebrate her legacy." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "Of course." She dipped into a curtsy, then, just before retreating, added, "May the past never haunt you too harshly." That night, Elena lay awake listening to the rustle of silk curtains, the accusation in Victoria's words stirring old doubts. Adrian, sensing her unrest, gathered her into his arms. "Don't let her poison your joy," he whispered. "You've faced worse." His reassurance held weight, but Elena realized the external threats were mirrored by her own inner turmoil. She drifted into uneasy sleep, dreams echoing with her mother's voice, a lament that turned into a triumphant crescendo. The following morning brought respite in the form of a surprise visitor. Madame Clarice, Elena's godmother and retired opera director. Clarice arrived bearing a weathered music score, a lost composition Elena's mother had written but never performed. "Your mother's masterpiece," Clarice said, eyes misty. "She believed you would bring it to life one day." Elena's breath caught. The score was inscribed in her mother's flowing hand, each measure imbued with passion and pain. Clarice encouraged her to prepare it for the gala, promising mentorship. As Elena and Clarice pored over the notation in a sunlit salon, Elena felt a surge of purpose. Here was her inheritance, a chance not just to honor her mother, but to claim her own voice. Word of the composition spread quickly. Victor's jealousy deepened. He saw it as an affront to his career's trajectory. Meanwhile, Adrian, eager to show his support, organized private coaching with the estate's visiting conductor, Maestro Delgado. Under Delgado's rigorous guidance, Elena's confidence soared, her voice finding dimensions she had never explored. Yet with each step upward, the stakes escalated. Preparations for the gala collided with final wedding arrangements. Elena found herself torn between devotion to her art and the pressure to conform to societal expectations. On one afternoon, she discovered her bridal gown torn by accident. Delgado's enthusiastic gesture had caught the fabric. The designer threatened to delay alterations, throwing her timeline into disarray. Frustration welled within Elena. She lashed out at Delgado for his carelessness, then ran to the gardens where the wisteria still bloomed. She pressed her palms to the trunk of an ancient oak, damning the world for demanding she excel in every role: daughter, fiancé, artist. Tears coursed down her cheeks, and for the first time, she questioned whether she could fulfill all these obligations without losing herself. Adrian found her collapsed at the oak's base. He knelt and wrapped her in his arms. "You're stretched too thin," he said. "Let me bear some of the load." With trembling breath, Elena nodded. Over the next days, Adrian took charge of wedding logistics, vendors, guest lists, timelines, so she could immerse herself in music. He became her buffer against Victor's provocations and Victoria's subtle machinations, handling each crisis with calm resolve. On the eve of the charity gala, a final rehearsal was scheduled in the grand ballroom, the same room where Elena's mother had performed her last song. The hall lay empty, moonlight spooling across marble floors. Elena stood at center stage, Maestro Delgado at the piano, Adrian leaning against a column in the shadows. As the first notes of her mother's composition rang out, Elena closed her eyes. Memories of her mother's laughter mingled with the echo of past trauma. Her voice rose hesitantly at first, then found its full power, rich, raw, and incandescent. The music surged through the hall, notes like droplets of water cascading into an ocean of sound. Halfway through, doubt crept in. Was she merely a vessel for her mother's genius, or was she forging her own path? The chord's tension pulled her off balance, and for a heartbeat her voice wavered. In that instant, Adrian stepped into the light and gently squeezed her hand. Their eyes met, steady, unwavering. Elena inhaled, centering herself on his gaze, and the next phrase poured forth with clarity and conviction. When the final, triumphant chord faded, silence reigned for a heartbeat before Maestro Delgado's thunderous applause filled the hall. Adrian moved forward, clapping until his palms stung. In that moment, Elena realized the rising action of her life had led her here, forging unity between past and present, weaving her mother's legacy into her own story, and affirming that love, like music, thrived when shared. Yet as the echoes faded, she sensed the approach of the ultimate test. The gala's public debut, followed by her wedding vows. The harmony she'd composed within was strong, but would it carry through the crucible of scrutiny and the tension of commitment? With one more shared glance, Elena and Adrian turned toward the mirrored doors, ready to face the audience, and whatever discord lay beyond. In their joined reflection, she saw not only a fiancé and her protector, but two souls prepared to compose a future together, note by emboldened note. The evening of the charity gala arrived at last. In the grand marquee erected on the estate's lawn, crystal chandeliers floated overhead, and velvet drapes framed the stage like regal curtains. A hush fell as Elena stepped forward, resplendent in a gown of midnight blue that shimmered under the soft lights. Her heart pounded, not with fear of singing, but with the knowledge that tonight would test everything she had fought to claim: her voice, her love, and her future. Adrian stood at the wings, his hand gripping hers in a silent vow of solidarity. Across the room, Victor Mallory lounged with feigned nonchalance, his eyes calculating whether tonight's triumph or failure would define Elena's career. In a shadowed corner, Victoria Dunham observed with cool interest, the ghost of their past liaison pulsing between her and Adrian. Elena raised her chin and signaled Maestro Delgado. The piano's first resonant chord rolled through the air, and she opened her mouth to sing her mother's unreleased composition, an aria of longing, loss, and redemption. As her clear soprano notes unfurled, the gala's glittering audience leaned in, entranced by the purity of her tone. But then, from the mezzanine's edge, Victor's voice rang out, "Bravo, Elena truly inherited talent." His clap was slow, mocking. A ripple of unease passed through Elena's veins, but she pressed on, letting the music carry her beyond his shadow. Halfway through the aria, a sudden crash echoed from backstage, a fallen prop, harmless but jarring. Elena's breath caught, and for a moment her world fractured. The audience murmured, some gasped. In that heartbeat of chaos, doubt flared. If she faltered here, all her painstaking growth would shatter. She closed her eyes, picturing her mother's face in the garden, the sun glinting on her auburn hair. She heard her mother's voice urging her forward. Then Adrian's steady heartbeat thrummed through her palm, anchoring her to the present. With renewed resolve, Elena drew a deep breath and lifted her voice higher, each note more radiant than the last. Suddenly, Victor stepped onto the stage, uninvited, hearing an opening in the tumult. He offered a patronizing bow and extended his hand toward Elena's sheet music. "Allow me," he said, "to demonstrate the proper interpretation." A murmur shot through the hall, shocking breach of decorum. Elena's pulse hammered. If she yielded even an inch, Victor would claim dominance. Adrian strode forward, blocking Victor's advance. "Stay back," he warned, voice firm. His eyes burned with protective fire. "This is Elena's moment." Victor's lips twisted into a sneer. "Perhaps you fear she might outshine you, Adrian." He turned to the audience. "After all, I've guided her more than he ever could." Whispers rippled through the guests. A few nodded, others looked uncertain. The balance of power teetered. Elena stood on trembling legs, torn between lashing out and preserving the gravity of her performance. Then, with the final verse of her aria approaching, she made her choice. She released Adrian's hand, lifted her chin, and the aria's climactic note hanging in the silence, delivered it with such fierce sincerity that the chandeliers themselves seemed to quiver. The hall erupted into stunned silence, followed by thunderous applause that shook the tent walls. Victor's face drained of color, his triumphant smile gone. Adrian exhaled and moved to Elena, wrapping her in a fierce embrace that spoke of solidarity beyond words. But the confrontation was not yet over. Victoria swept onto the stage, her expression unreadable. "Magnificent," she said, voice soft yet carrying to the rafters. "Truly magnificent." She turned to Adrian. "I misjudged you both." Her gaze flicked to Elena. "You have earned your place." A hush fell once more as guests processed this unprecedented concession. Then, in an unexpected gesture, Victor himself stepped forward. His arrogance gone, he offered Elena a curt bow. "Well done," he acknowledged, voice quieter, tinged with respect. Adrian felt Elena's hand tighten in his. Between them, the battlefield of rivalry and jealousy now lay strewn with the ruins of petty ambition. Elena exhaled, tears springing unbidden, tears of triumph and relief. As the guests surged forward to congratulate her, Elena and Adrian exchanged a glance rich with unspoken promises. Tonight, the climactic confrontation had not only protected her artistry, but had also forged an unbreakable bond. They stood at the nexus of past wounds and future hopes, ready to face whatever coda life would compose next, together. The morning after the gala dawned quietly over the estate. The air was crisp with the scent of wisteria and rose, but beneath the serenity lay the shift that had occurred overnight. Elena awoke to the gentle light filtering through her bedroom window, the echo of applause still ringing in her ears. She sat up, cradling the medal engraved with the charity's crest, a testament to her triumph. At her side, a single white rose lay waiting, sent with a note in Victor's precise hand. "Your performance last night was extraordinary. Thank you for reminding me what true artistry can be." Elena felt a flutter of pride, but her thoughts were already turning inward. The triumph had been public, yet the true victory had occurred behind the applause. She had claimed her mother's legacy, faced her fears on stage, and most importantly, relied on Adrian's steadfast love. She rose and dressed in a simple cream dress, its soft fabric a counterpoint to the sequined gowns and satin suits of the previous evening. Today was dedicated to reflection and renewal. Downstairs in the breakfast room, Adrian awaited her with steaming coffee and a plate of lavender scones. He offered her a warm smile that reached his eyes. "Good morning, songbird," he teased gently. "You look like a woman who slept beautifully and deserves another standing ovation." Elena accepted her coffee, savoring the rich aroma. "I feel different," she admitted softly. "Last night changed me." He reached across the table, brushing a lock of hair from her face. "How so?" She stirred her scone thoughtfully. "It's one thing to conquer a stage. It's another to reconcile my past, embrace my present, and believe in our future, especially knowing how deeply you'd stand by me through it all." Her gaze met his. "I've never been more certain of where my heart belongs." Adrian's smile deepened, and he took her hand. "I feel the same. Last night was proof that, no matter what comes, we can face it together." They lingered over breakfast, sharing plans to visit the conservatory where Elena had first learned to sing. She wanted to record her mother's unpublished compositions in the very hall where those pieces were born, turning private sorrow into shared beauty. Adrian promised to arrange the funding, drawing on his connections in the arts community to secure studio time and promotional support. Later that morning, under a sky the color of spun sugar, Elena and Adrian strolled through the restored rose garden where she had first sung for him. The fountain's gentle spout caught the sunlight, scattering prisms across the gravel path. Children from a nearby village charity group giggled as they chased butterflies among the blooms, an innocent reminder of music's power to heal. Elena paused at the base of the arbor, tracing the outlines of fading footprints in the stone. "Do you remember the first time I sang here?" she asked softly. Adrian knelt to brush a petal from the stone. "I do. You were so vulnerable, and yet it was the most beautiful moment I'd ever witnessed." He stood and offered his arm. "Shall we record a new memory here?" She slipped her arm through his and grinned, the lightness in her chest a contrast to the weight she'd carried only days before. Together, they hummed a few bars of her mother's rehearsal piece, their voices merging in quiet harmony. Passers-by paused, enchanted by the impromptu duet of fiancé and protector. In the days that followed, news of Elena's gala performance, combined with the backstory of her mother's lost compositions, spread through the arts community like a gentle crescendo. Press inquiries arrived at the estate. Interviews for classical music journals, invitations to perform at benefit concerts, and even a request from a prestigious European opera house. Elena found herself marveling at the trajectory her life had taken, once so constrained by fear, now expanding beyond her wildest dreams. Amid the whirlwind of attention, Adrian remained her anchor. He arranged each engagement with meticulous care, ensuring that Elena never felt overwhelmed. He accompanied her to rehearsal studios, drove her to publicity meetings, and most tenderly, found moments of solitude for just the two of them. One such moment came on a golden afternoon when they picnicked by the koi pond near the estate's reflecting pool. Elena dipped a finger into the water, sending ripples through the iridescent fish. "I never imagined my life could hold so much joy," she confessed. Adrian handed her a strawberry from the picnic basket. "Joy is a song we compose together, and this is only the first movement." He smiled at her, full of promise. As the wedding day approached, Elena's nerves fluttered anew, less from fear of performance and more from the weight of commitment. Would she be able to balance her burgeoning career with the responsibilities of marriage? Would the shadows of her past ever resurface to test their bond? On the eve of the wedding, Adrian led her back to the grand ballroom where she had sung at the gala. The chandeliers sparkled like distant stars, and the polished marble floor held echoes of her triumphant aria. He guided her to the stage's center, then knelt before her in a gesture of playful ceremony. "By the power vested in me as your fiancé," he began with mock solemnity, "I hereby declare that we shall face every high note and every low with equal courage." He offered her a single white rose, a symbol of purity, resilience, and new beginnings. Elena laughed, tears of happiness pooling in her eyes, and accepted it. He rose, took both her hands in his, and spoke sincerely. "Elena, you have shown the world what it means to rise above fear, to honor your past, and to embrace love without reservation. I promise to be your steadfast companion, whether in the glow of the spotlight or the quiet corners of our everyday lives. Will you marry me tomorrow?" Elena's joy spilled over. "Yes," she whispered, pressing the rose to her heart. "1,000 times, yes." Beneath the arbor where they first met, surrounded by family, friends, and the choir that had performed at the gala, Elena and Adrian exchanged vows. As they spoke promises of devotion, the garden thrummed with the harmony of lives intertwined. When Adrian slipped the ring onto Elena's finger, she felt a surge of certainty. This was the culmination of every conflict conquered, every fear faced, and every secret shared. After the ceremony, guests raised glasses in a sun-dappled clearing. Elena lifted hers to Adrian, her eyes shining. "To us," she pronounced. "May our love be the greatest composition we ever create." He clinked his glass against hers. "To us, and to every note we'll write together." As laughter and music filled the air, Elena slipped away toward the wisteria arbor once more. There she closed her eyes and sang, softly, yet with all the power of her journey. In her voice were echoes of her mother's dreams, the trials she had overcome, and the promise of a future she and Adrian would shape side by side. And in that garden, where another life had ended in heartbreak years ago, a new song began, one of hope, resilience, and love's enduring melody. The sun dipped low as evening settled over the estate, painting the sky in hues of rose and lavender. Elena stood alone beneath the wisteria arbor, her wedding gown still fresh with the day's celebrations. In her hand, she held the white rose Adrian had given her on the eve of their vows. She inhaled its delicate fragrance and smiled, recalling every step of their journey, from heartfelt song to public triumph, from hidden fears to unspoken promises. Around her, lanterns glowed softly, and distant laughter drifted from the reception beyond the hedges. Yet in this quiet moment, all the noise fell away. Elena felt the steady rhythm of her own heartbeat, once a source of doubt, now a testament to her resilience. She closed her eyes and whispered a silent thank you to her mother, whose legacy had guided her, and to Adrian, whose unwavering love had carried her through. As the last light faded, Elena turned to join him. Adrian stood at the arbor's edge, his hand outstretched. Together, they stepped forward into the twilight, ready to write the next movement of their life's composition. And in the soft glow of lantern light, two hearts beat in perfect harmony, each note a promise of enduring love and shared dreams.